Hit me.
From Studio A in Arcata, behind the redwood curtain, it's time for...
Succotash.
Yes, Succotash, the Comedy Soundcast Soundcast featuring snippets from comedy...
Soundcast.
And also interviews with comedians, comedian soundcasters, and other showbiz folk. And now, here's this episode's host from up the coast, the man who puts the X in Xbox and the tie on antisocial, Comedy Soundcast Soundcaster, Tyson Saner.
Saner. Saner.
Saluton, estas me, Tyson Saner, and I both happily and gratefully welcome you to this episode of Succotash, whose number is 306. Could I have picked a clunkier way to say that? Perhaps so. It's hard to say. It is, however, very easy to say, thank you for listening, so I'll do that now. Thank you for listening. If you've made it this far into the intro, I think we will get along just fine. I share hosting duties of this podcast roughly every other week with Mark Hershon, who created the show 11 years ago to showcase other folks' podcasts in a Whitman sampler-style format. And last week in show 305, Mr. Hershon did just that with an episode called Clips on a Whim that featured a quartet of clips from the Soundcast's entry level, Last Things First, Parks and Recollection, and Time Suck. It's a fun episode, and I encourage you to listen to it at your earliest convenience via services like Apple and Google Podcasts, Stitcher, Audible, Amazon Music, SoundCloud, Podchaser.com, Podbay, YouTube, and on our own home site, succotashshow.com. This week, I've got clips for you from the Soundcast's The JV Club with Janet Varney, The Writers Panel, and The Boogie Monster. I've also got an ad from our longtime fake sponsor, Henderson's Pants, kicking around somewhere, so that should round out the episode nicely. Alright then, let's get to the clippage. First up, the JV Club with Janet Varney from Janet Varney and Maximum Fun. Its show description says, remember what it was like to be an awkward teenager? And remember how some things haven't really changed that much for you since then? Join proud dork Janet Varney as she explores the highs and lows of the bygone years with some of her favorite women as they talk their way through the terrible teens into adult-lescence. Adult-lescence. Warning, this podcast contains sincerity. Clip I've selected is from an episode published on May 28th, 2020, with Caitlin Hugh and Stephanie Erb. The episode description says, it's a special three-hander, six-hander, triple-header. Whether any of that accurately describes this week's episode in slang, JV welcomes both Caitlin Hugh and Stephanie Erb from Therapy with Pammy for a chat about growing up in one place versus moving all over and all the things that come with both. Top hats, frizzles, bread.
Let's dive in. Let's hear about the show.
Yeah, well, I love your podcast and how it's about the adolescence, and actually just listening to it a little bit leading up to this got me thinking about so many things from middle school and high school that I can't wait to dive into later. Whoa. And that's like not territory I go into often because it was so painful and strange and hard and weird and confusing no matter where you were on the landscape of things. But so Stephanie and I co-created a show called Therapy with Pammy, and it was born out of improvising backstage doing theater, which we love and we cannot wait to do again when it's safe.
Absolutely.
We're both members at the Road Theater Company, and we were doing a world premiere of a new play by Jamie Branley, and I have had this character Pammy for probably 10 years, and she tends to come out when there are bright lights and makeup mirrors. And Stephanie discovered her backstage, and
I basically got a hairbrush, and I was like, this character is so odd. I must ask her questions. So I started doing a basic talk show. Every night I'd ask her a pointed question, and she would answer, and hilarity would ensue. And I started recording them and posting them on Facebook, and people were losing their minds. So I was like, as I've been an actress for a very long time, and I realized I wanted to start making content myself because it's just not always, I don't always have access to what I would love to be doing.
Absolutely.
And I do enjoy making people laugh. And so I asked Caitlin if she'd like to try to make a TV show. And she said yes. And then she's incredibly good at crowdsourcing people of talent to help.
We can call it producing.
Yeah, okay.
There you go.
She's a boss babe producer. I think that's what she is.
I'm stepping into the big girl pants
That's
right
right.
now.
That's right.
And I have been producing my own music videos I had produced 4 different music videos over the years, and I release my music, and I work with producers who do the actual audio recording of my music, but then the videos were so fun, and I was intimidated to work with sound. So I had just been doing music videos, and they're a very forgiving format, and sort of teaching myself filmmaking through that. And then Pammy came along, and it was like, okay, this is something we could do. We can isolate it in one location, keep it simple, get some friends together, call in some favors, come out with a fun little beat sheet of things that Pammy might want to discover in therapy. I had actually just come out of a year in talk therapy, and I couldn't help but think as I was in my therapist's office, like sometimes laying on the couch, but it also felt very dramatic to be laying on the couch. But some days I was so tired, I was like, can I just lay down? And just talking about things and being like, gosh, these are such good monologues.
I think the other thing that's interesting about Pammy is she's very much stuck at maybe 11 years old. Wouldn't you think? She's not really,
totally.
She's not a fully developed human. So the Dr. L's,
there's a lot there.
Dr. L's goal is to help her grow up. And, Caitlin and I are by no means anti-therapy. We both have had great assistance from it. We've also had weird situations where the therapist is loony. I had a situation where a therapist fell asleep while I was talking to her.
Oh, God, what a classic. What a classic with a thing you're like, that would never happen in real life. Guess what?
It totally happens. We have a tiny blooper episode where Dr. L, my character, falls asleep. But we just found that it was a sort of life-affirming way to make people laugh and also make fun of an iconic character type that we have in our culture right now, which is the socialite influencer. But yet she's a real person who might need a lot of help,
Right.
Right.
Yeah, that's great. I love everything you're saying. One of the things that I don't know why this kind of stuck with me. I love the idea of doing something that's intimidating, but if there's a way to do it that removes like one factor, that, like you were talking about, the difference between editing sound and editing a music video, where you have this capacity to be working with a pre-existing track that allows you to kind of throw out one of those things that feel so intimidating about filmmaking, and then that becomes like the gateway into, okay, well, now all of the other stuff that also maybe was intimidating to begin with, I had a chance to get to know in a more friendly way, kind of, and then to be able to introduce that next piece. That just struck me because I thought, what a wonderful thing for people to think about, that I think sometimes we don't allow ourselves to think about, which is this idea of like, here's this one thing I'm interested in. I better get really good at every aspect of it as soon as possible with a sense of real urgency so that I lose all joy in it, rather than like, well, wait a minute, let me think this through. Like, it's sort of funny because I guess we live in a culture of such technology and such immediacy that we see other people be good at stuff, especially in that realm, and kind of go, oh, well, things are advanced to the point now where, like, how could I learn? I'm a Luddite, or and that, I don't know, that just really struck me. It really inspired me.
In late April this year, this Soundcast published what looks to be their 500th episode, which is a pretty tremendous milestone, so I would like to extend a belated congratulations to them. You can find the show on Twitter at JV Club Podcast. That is at JVCLUBPODCAST. That is all lowercase. And in its description, it says a podcast with amazing ladies hosted by at Janet Varney. So it gives her Twitter handle there, which is all lowercase again, JANETVARNEY. And it says it posts Thursdays on Maximum Fun. And then the reason why I included this description is because it says tweets by Chris M. Royce. So if I'm to interpret that in my head, it seems that there's somebody else who tweets for that Twitter account. But you can reach him at all lowercase CHRISMROYCE. The guest Caitlin Hugh can be reached at all lowercase KAITLINHUWE. Stephanie Erb can be reached at Erbness. That is capital ERBNESS. You could find the JV Club's website at thejvclub.org. That is all lowercase thejvclub.org. And if you Google Therapy with Pammy, that is Pammy with an I, P-A-M-I, one of the first links is a Facebook page that lets you watch something pretty much immediately. Next up, The Writer's Panel from Forever Dog. Its show description says, "The definitive insider's guide to our current golden age of television, Ben Blacker's The Writer's Panel is an ever-expanding anthology of live convention panels and intimate in-studio interviews with the writers, producers, and showrunners responsible for all the shows you can't stop watching, over the course of nearly 500 episodes and counting." The Writers Panel has sat across from guests such as Vince Gilligan of Breaking Bad, Amy Sherman Palladino from Gilmore Girls and The Marvelous Miss Maisel, Keegan-Michael Key and Jordan Peele of Key and Peele, Liz Merriweather of New Girl, and Damon Lindelof of Lost and The Leftovers to talk about the art and business of creating great television, produced by the Forever Dog Podcast Network. The clip I've selected is from an episode, going back in time once again, to 2020, this time October 6th, features 3 guests, Mary Laws of Monsterland, Brandon Braga of Books of Blood, and Matt Morgan from Hellstrom. And then a brief description that includes the guests' roles in their projects says a panel interview with Mary Laws, who is the creator of Monsterland, Brandon Braga, the director/co-writer of Books of Blood, and Matt Morgan, who's the producer of Hellstrom. And of course, it is hosted by Ben Blacker.
Mary, I want to start with you on this because I think Monsterland is just a fascinating show. I really enjoyed those short stories when I read them, and it's really neat to see the tone and the themes of those stories carried over to the screen really successfully.
Thank you.
I'd like to talk about your getting involved with this show and what is the idea behind it? What are you using horror to talk about, if anything?
Sure. I mean, so I started as a playwright and was kind of hired to write this screenplay with Nick Ruffin while I was finishing up a playwriting degree, and honestly had really I had never thought about writing for film and television, and I had especially never thought about writing for horror. But what I learned as I sort of jumped onto that boat and just kind of like started paddling with Nick was that horror is a really incredible form of social commentary. I think that, my experiences of the world are both equal parts beautiful and brilliant, but also completely horrific. I think we could look at the world around us right now and we can see a lot of that horror coming to the surface. And there's a lot of private horror that's becoming public. I think the internet has, made that possible. And so what I really like about the genre is that you're able to approach some of those harder, more painful subjects from a place of genre. And I think maybe to me, it feels more approachable, I guess, than seeing that as like a straight drama or something like that. I hardly ever write straight drama. In fact, when I worked on Succession, which was a really fun and happy show to be a part of, it was a very happy room. Jesse Armstrong is an incredible person to work for. I found that to be sort of harder for me because even though it's a satire and there's a lot of humor, I find that I can talk about something more if it's a little bit elevated. And so to me, horror really gives me that way in, which is why I loved Nathan Ballingrud's book, North American Lake Monsters, which Monsterland is loosely based off of. We're an 8-part anthology series. And so some of our 8 episodes are direct adaptations from his book. Some are inspired by stories from his book. Some are sort of monsters of our own creation. He got to be a part of the writer's room with us for 2 weeks at the very beginning, came in and helped us sort of adapt his stories, but also come up with new stories in his same genre. And what I loved about his book is that it is horror, certainly, but it sits in a subgenre of horror called weird fiction, which I think to me is always the best horror. Weird fiction is like it sits really close to our natural world. So it's a world that's really recognizable, but where like, supernatural elements, dark elements can sort of step forward out of the shadows and talk to a person living in a world that we recognize. Like, I think Rosemary's Baby is a really great example of like that weird fiction. I really love Roman Polanski's Repulsion, which I think is a great example of that weird fiction where you're sort of allowed a deeper insight into your world through something that appears more dark and even at times like scary, demonic, but not always scary, sometimes also just strange and mystifying and beautiful. And that's what Nathan's book does. He's got it's an anthology of short stories that I thought were so very human and truly, truly rooted in our world. It's not a world that's completely unrecognizable. And I felt so connected to the material because of that, because it was going to provide the writers, provide us with a platform to talk about real issues, real humans, our real current moment, but with some kind of elevation, with a lift that would be both entertaining, but also packed full of meaning. Yeah. So that's what I loved about his book, and that's really what our show is striving to do.
So here's another Soundcast that made it to 500 episodes, in this case back in September of 2021, so heartfelt congratulations to your show as well. The show does not have a dedicated Twitter account, but they do have a link tree, and that is LINKTR and then .ee/writers panel, all lowercase, WRITERSPANEL. Mary Laws is not on Twitter, but does have an Instagram, all lowercase, MaryChristinalaws, as Mary Christina Laws. Brandon Braga is on Twitter at BRANNON, BRAGA. And Matt Morgan can be found at MCharlesMorgan, M, CHARLES, MORGAN. And the host, Ben Blacker, can be reached on Twitter at Ben Blacker, BEN, BLACKER. You can also go to foreverdogpodcast.com/the-writers-panel. And they're also on Facebook at /T, WRITERS, PANEL.
Friends, summer is just around the corner, so you might be thinking to yourself, gosh, it's time to get out the suntan lotion, rubber thongs, and good old Bermuda shorts. Stop right there, Pilgrim. Did you know that every time you slip on a pair of their shorts, the British Protectorate of Bermuda receives a 2-cent royalty? That's right, which is why Henderson's Pants, a loyal and legal corporate entity of these United States since 1896, is introducing their Wake Island abbreviated trousers. Roomy and comfortable like the Bermuda shorts you've come to love, but with the freedom that comes from knowing you won't be helping out the subjects of our former British oppressors. The stylish Wake Island abbreviated trousers are named for the unincorporated tiny landmass in the North Pacific, which is a legal U.S. protectorate. Now, when those hot, sticky days of summer hit, slip on a pair of Henderson's Wake Island abbreviated trousers and go for a stroll on the beach, around the pool, or through the mall. Feel free to wear briefs, boxers, or nothing at all under your new, snazzy, and 100% American abbreviated trousers, because, as a U.S. citizen, you have the right to stow your junk any way you choose. Originally designed for the U.S. Department of Immigration, trout farmers, and dark, seedy theaters, that's Henderson's Wake Island abbreviated trousers, available wherever things you put your legs into are sold. And now back to more of Succotash.
And thank you, Bill Haywatt. Finally tonight, The Boogie Monster with Kyle Kinane and Dave Stone. It's another show that's been featured before on Succotash, but its description says, Kyle Kinane and Dave Stone talk about ghosts and barbecue, maybe interview people, and maybe have had a few drinks before they started recording. This episode was recorded live from Humboldt County. In fact, it's called Live from Humboldt County. It was recorded in Eureka at the Savage Henry Comedy Club, which I have been to a few times, although not really since the pandemic. I do plan on going back because they have a lot of great live entertainment and a continuously vibrant comedy scene. So the show dropped on May 10th, 2022, and its description says, Kyle and Dave are live from the Savage Henry Comedy Club in beautiful Humboldt County, California. They get into some Squatch talk with local wizard Dr. Foxmeat and Robert Leiterman and Rowdy Kelly of the Bluff Creek Project.
Dr. Foxmeat, you're a local, let's just say legend.
Yes.
You grew up around here?
I did not.
Okay.
But I've been here for quite some time.
You've been here a while?
Yeah.
Any stories? Any encounters?
The extent of my direct experience with Bigfoot or Sasquatch has been Bobo. Anybody familiar with Bobo? Bobo. Drunk off of keg beer, hanging out on my back porch doing Bigfoot calls. And then Matt Redbeard, who I'm sure you guys know.
Redbeard, sure.
He was out on my back porch one time and he heard some branches creaking and cracking, and he was dead set that was definitely Sasquatch out there. I think maybe on Bobo's, because Bobo told me straight up, like, the place you're living, there's definitely Sasquatch out here. Now, I said there was a lot of keg beer involved, so it's hard to say. But, that's been my direct experience with it. But, I grew up with Leonard Nimoy, the Patterson-Gimlin footage. And that's part of the reason why I've, wanted to be in this area.
Yeah, some of it, Eureka seems to have a lot of red eye witness accounts of things where I'm like, all right, well, I saw something. What did you do before you saw a thing? Well, there was some mushrooms.
Well, and there's a lot there that is, like you're saying, that Patterson-Gimlin footage is just so captivating and convincing. When you look at because the term Bigfoot was, the difference between Bigfoot and Sasquatch, Bigfoot, the term, was actually coined in the Eureka Times Standard, and it ended up being sort of a hoaxy sort of a thing. So it's this constant push and pull for me. You mentioned X-Files. I want to believe, but there's definitely this constant push and pull.
Yeah, that's been the theme of, like, when we ever talk about a subject, is that there's enough true calamity in the world that it's hard. The older you get, it's harder to allow your imagination to take root. Like, you just look at the news and be like, what am I going to do? Like, daydream about something that might make me happy? I got to worry about a war in Ukraine and the wage disparity and everything. So I approach all these subjects from that standpoint. I want to be on board with it. It's when, like Rob, like you were saying, if the research isn't done, the evidence isn't really looked at from a inquisitive viewpoint, just like, well, look, here's a video. Like, all right, has anybody looked at the video? Like, really looked at it, or just went like, I'm going to believe, so I'm going to believe any piece of evidence that comes along? And that's what undermines so many of these accounts for me, is because nobody's kind of even double checked themselves because of how bad they want something to be, that they never even like, well, I got to.
Right, and that's always the hardest part.
Yeah.
And working on the shows that I've worked on, I've interviewed probably 60, 70 people, for the shows. And once you interview that many people, there's always that chance that somebody's actually telling the truth.
Yeah.
And I've talked to a lot of old timers, talking about being old. It's not just young people seeing this. These are old timers that are coming out of the woods, talking about it because 50 years ago or 40 years ago, it was not a cool thing to say.
Yeah.
You got ridiculed. But now with all the productions that are being made about it and a little more prevalence for people to believe in it, they're coming forward. And these guys are woodsmen, too. They know the difference between a bear and they know the difference between an owl hoot and stuff like that. But what you guys are getting into and what he's talking about is an experience. You go out in the woods at night and you hear something creaking and cracking, and that just becomes an experience. We're never going to prove Bigfoot that way. We're going to have either another really good video with some physical evidence or a body.
Yeah.
It's not going to be proven by going out. And you guys were talking about this, what's the difference between squatching and just going to camp?
Yeah, hanging out.
Not really much.
Yeah.
Not really.
It's got to be out there.
Yeah, you got to be out there. Yeah. And what, Robert and I are fairly seasoned in being in the woods. We can differentiate what the sounds are out there most of the time. But both he and I have had experiences where, well, no, I've never heard that before.
What's been the most compelling?
Compelling for me was showing up at a very remote location in a 3-car convoy. Me and one other person Robert and his son were in another car, and then one other car behind us. And it's a one-way in lake up in the mountains. And we pull in probably 11:30 at night, something like that, because we had a big camp out about 7 miles away, and there were several people down at that camp out, but that was 2,000 feet below and, several miles away. Anyway, we pull in, and as soon as Bart and I get out, we hear what Bobo does exactly. Mm-hmm. Just the huge male call, I guess, is what they're saying it is. And we're like, man, that could be Bobo, but we know Bobo. He's 7 miles away. He's not anywhere close to us. Mm-hmm. And there was no evidence of anybody else being there. Yeah. Only Bart and I heard it as we stepped out, but it was very loud, and it was echoing off. We kind of figured out where it was, and then we eventually did a hike over that direction, me with a sound recorder and him with a FLIR. I think he had his FLIR. Nothing really happened. We had some kind of weird, heavy thud. But that's the closest thing I've ever had. It was a very definitive call that I don't think anybody could have replicated that.
What's your initial reaction? Do you get scared? Do you get excited? Like finally hearing something in person, or are you just kind of like, whoa, oh wow, this is
right.
wasn't ready. Even though I've been doing this all the time, I wasn't ready to hear it.
Well, when you hear something like that, and I'd only probably been involved with the Bigfoot phenomena for about 2 years. So that when you first get into something like this, you're looking at every video, and you're really doing your research, and you're out in the woods, and you're a little more sensitive. Yeah. Over the years, you become a little bit mute to all that kind of stuff. Now, if I heard something like that again, that would have been incredible. Mm-hmm. Yeah. But at that time, it definitely excited us. Bart, who is a much more seasoned Bigfooter, so to say, was super excited about it, and he's pretty convinced that was, a male Sasquatch. We were in a prime location that had previous sightings.
You can find the show on Twitter at Boogie Monster Pod, which is capital BOOGIE, capital MNSTR, capital POD. Neither one of the guests are on Twitter, as far as I can tell. But if you search the Bluff Creek Project, that is BLUFFCREEK Project, on Twitter, you will definitely find mention of Ranger Robert Leiterman, and the Bluff Creek Project itself is on Twitter, at all lowercase, BLUFFCREEKPRO. Dr. Foxmeat can be found on Twitter at all lowercase, DOCTORFOXMEAT. And hosts Kyle Kinane and Dave Stone can be found at all lowercase Kyle Kinane, KYLEKINANE, and Dave Stone is all lowercase DAVESTONECOMEDY. And apparently the show's main website is at kylekinane.com, spelled the same way as before, and then /boogie-monster. And that brings us neatly to the end portion of this program. I do hope you found something to enjoy while you were listening. Podcasting has become such a huge part of the world of entertainment in the last 11 years since Succotash began. It's really fascinating to me right now, in this moment. It's a legitimate cultural phenomenon that shows no signs of ceasing to be a thing. And why would it? I wonder what, if any, long-term societal effects of this format will be on the generations of listeners and content providers. Or will the world survive long enough to look back on this period of time with any sort of nostalgic fondness? I suppose that remains to be seen. If you enjoyed this program, won't you take a moment to rate and or review us wherever that applies? There's a whole archive of episodes going back to 2011 with some pretty quality content, much of which is, if nothing else, historical audio documents of the time in which they were made, more or less. Until next time, thank you for listening, be decent to each other, and go to www.tysonsaner.com to find other stuff I've been working on over the years, including gaming videos, music, and a whole other soundcast called Anti-Social Show that I co-host with Hunter Block. And if you happen to be asked if you've heard anything interesting lately, and we come to mind, won't you please pass the succotash?
You've been listening to Succotash, the Comedy Soundcast Soundcast, with your host, Tyson Saner. Brought to you by Henderson's Pants and...
Imagine your company's name right here.
Rate us and review us at Apple and Google Podcasts. Find us on the web at succotashshow.com, on Stitcher, on iHeartRadio, on YouTube,
on SoundCloud,
and wherever fine soundcasts are streamed and or downloaded. Follow us on Twitter and Instagram at Succotash Show. Like us on Facebook. Email us at TYSON at succotashshow.com or call into the Succotash Skype line at our toll-call number, 818-921-7212.
That number again is 818-921-7212.
You can also upload clips from your favorite Comedy Soundcasts directly to us using our direct upload link at hightail.com/u/succotash. Succotash is produced and engineered by Joe Paulino through the auspices of Studio P Sausalito, the home of the hit. Our hosts are Mark Hershon and Tyson Saner. Our musical director is
Scott Carvey.
Our booth assistant is
Kenny Durges.
Succotash is executive produced by Mark Hershon. Until next time, I'm your loyal booth announcer, Bill Haywatt, reminding you to please pass the Succotash. Goodbye. This has been a Succotash Patch production.